Boom-boodle-doo-doo. Greetings, my beautiful friends and fellow students of art. The world is a confusing place right now, and in light of current events, I think it's a perfect time to look into the future, into Native Futurisms and Native American apocalyptic art, at images of people surviving, thriving even, with gas masks. Let's take a hint from a number of popular Indigenous artists and go deep into what Winona LaDuke calls nuclear colonialism. And today, let's focus on its connection to race relations in the so-called United States. Sound good? Because when we do, we can deepen and widen and contextualize what we are feeling today. Whenever I research a topic, I first look at what the artists are saying about it, because artists are really good at communicating vast amounts of story and information quickly and artfully. They're good at compressing the macrocosm of the universe into the microcosm of artwork. For example, here, Carl Beam is compressing a very large history into a single image. And if we approach the symbols he's collected here as memory aids, like landmarks or like pictograms in a winter count, then each symbol becomes pregnant with stories. Beam is doing what a lot of artists do. He's recycling images from our collective memory. And he likes to plaster them onto the canvas using a Robert Rauschenberg photo transfer technique. You can do something like this for your final art project. Also, in today's class, I want to draw attention to artworks that use juxtaposition or a strange meeting of symbols. And we know that symbols are like people, that whenever they gather together, they exchange ideas and change one another. When symbols meet, they mate and generate a new symbol, like how two notes can come together to create a harmony, or two patterns can create a moire. And in your notes, instead of a 5-finger appreciation like we usually do, let's see what happens when you conjure stories about each of the 6 or 7 symbols in the painting separately. You know, maybe start with Luciani's portrait of Christopher Columbus. What's his hand doing? West Side? And the $5 bill, then the Curtis-style portrait of Chief Wolfrobe, the bees, and then the stoplight in the bottom right. What do these symbols make you think of? Oh, and then don't forget about the sky, the top portion or the head of the picture, where we find a famous image of the aftermath of the bombing of Hiroshima. And just in case we weren't sure what this was, the word Hiroshima is stenciled in white paint in the upper left corner. It's hard to see at first, but it's not subtle. The text is mirrored below by some brown text, the only color in the composition, Columbus Chronicles. Then on top of all of that, right on the surface, is maybe the most striking element of the entire painting, which we may have overlooked because it just fits in so well. Bold splashes of white paint. Titanium white, the most widely used paint in the world. Look around you right now. You will find some titanium white. Why is it important that the white paint drips down into the other symbols? What do those drips make you think of? Pause the video and do some writing or drawing. The artist is juxtaposing Hiroshima with images of colonialism, connecting the devastation of the atomic bomb with the devastation of European conquest. Is this a valid comparison? Hiroshima and colonialism? The United States had already committed genocide and near genocide on native populations by the time it built the atom bomb. It had already unleashed horrifying darkness into the world. But with the bomb, the Americans literally broke the world, cracked open the universe. And through those cracks, new darkness got in. The uranium used in the bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki were mined and tested illegally on Navajo land, Dinéta. Some of the closed and abandoned nuclear sites are now Superfund sites. This toxic waste gets into the air, into the water, the wildlife, the people, us. And in this series of oil paintings, Fuse, Two-Spirit artist Adrian Stimpson whose performance art we looked at last week, Stimpson brings together the buffalo and the bomb, two symbols for the US, but also two holocausts, the Buffalo Holocaust and the present nuclear colonialism, together in the crumpled time and space of the painting. Crumpled space. Paintings and drawings are really good at crumpling space. Notice that both the buffalo and the bomb are the same gold color, and they look kind of out of place in the empty, cold, monochromatic landscape. Nuclear colonialism, or radioactive colonialism, refers to an ongoing history of nuclear tests, uranium mining, and nuclear waste disposal on indigenous lands across North America and beyond. That's how Winona LaDuke puts it, the great environmentalist, teacher, and activist. She also reminds us of the bombardment of future proposals to dump toxic waste near Indian communities. She reminds us that the federal government is proposing to use Yucca Mountain, sacred to the Shoshone, as a dumping ground. Johnny Bob, Shoshone chief, says that if Yucca goes, everything goes. God, I love this painting by T.C. Cannon. It's like a blanket. Who shot the arrow? Who killed the sparrow? The red dress is the red earth, is the red sky. He lays it all out right there, right in front of our eyes. Cannon. He employs the mushroom cloud as a symbol for, quote, war and unstoppable Western technology, end quote. Kids these days associate the mushroom with psilocybin. When I was in high school, a lot of people wore these glass mushroom pendants in hemp necklaces. Remember those? But just imagine, those glass magic mushrooms would have a very different meaning in, say, Japan, where the mushroom shape always, on some level, signals Hiroshima. Here, the mushroom signals Nevada and New Mexico and Utah, which have all been exploited as nuclear testing and dumping grounds. And in his absolutely gorgeous watercolor painting, The End, from 1983, Western Shoshone and Washoe artist Jack Malotte envisions a nuclear apocalypse in a landscape that resembles his homeland in Nevada. The imagery, the three mushroom clouds, might seem like science fiction, but they're not. Almost 1,000 nuclear tests have been conducted at the Nevada site, the Nevada test site alone in Western Shoshone land, making it one of the most toxic places in the world. It's amazing that this country, in order to show the world how strong it is, bombs itself over and over again. It turns its own landscape into a nuclear apocalypse. It's bananas. It's what science fiction writer William Gibson says. The future is already here. It's just not very evenly distributed. Because most of the nuclear apocalypse scenario is distributed across indigenous land and near communities of color right now. I want everyone to look up the 20-year study, Toxic Wastes and Race in the United States, which concluded that race was the most significant factor associated with the location of hazardous waste facilities. Toxic waste and race in the United States. We also know that Native peoples face skyrocketing rates of cancer in areas where uranium is mined. People who grew up in the Four Corners develop ovarian and testicular cancers at 15 times the national average. Native women on Pine Ridge in the Black Hills experience a miscarriage rate 6 times higher than the national average. I'm getting this from Indigenous scholar Andrea Smith's book, Conquest, Sexual Violence and American Indian Genocide, where Smith broadens our definition of sexual violence to include nuclear bombs and toxic waste. What do you think of this poem by transdisciplinary two-spirit artist Demian DinéYazhi? who also makes work that confronts the toxic ramifications of uranium mining and what they call the, quote, heteropatriarchal colonial nightmare, end quote. In the installation Hey Jolene, DinéYazhi gives us segments of text projected onto a screen. The poem references the New Mexico Church Rock spill of 1979, the largest and worst radioactive toxic spill in U.S. history, Church Rock. The text is golden, and the red background is generated by the artist's own body. That's right. They say, quote, "This is actually my finger pressing against the camera lens pointed towards the sun." Yes, brilliant. We are looking at the, sun, the exploding star and source of life, through the artist's own bloody body. DinéYazhi. They are the founder of the Indigenous Artist Initiative RISE, Radical Indigenous Survivance and Empowerment. And also, they serve as co-editor of the zine Locusts, a post-Queer Nation zine. Here's one of their works in neon. My ancestors will not let me forget this. And when we step back, we see a yellow disc reflected in the ground like a sun. And then we might see the mushroom-shaped light reflected on the wall that resembles a nuclear bomb blast. This reminds me of the composition we find here in John Fedorov's painting Desecrations, number 3, the yellow radiation house. It's interesting, the paint itself is desecrating the white hand-woven rug by Navajo master weaver Tyra Preston, and Fedorov says that this is on purpose. Okay, please forgive my poor pronunciation, but the Diné word for uranium, litso, means yellow dirt. Yellow dirt. It's also pollen. Suddenly corn pollen, tladadin, becomes more complex. Maybe litso is tladadin's evil doppelganger. Also, according to the Diné Bahane, in the third world, which is beneath or within this one, there lives yellow grasshopper people in yellow holes in a yellow landscape. Is it future or is it past? Or is it present? This is a yellow puck, another yellow world beneath or within our own. In the TV show Chernobyl, there's a scene where people are dancing in the radioactive ash that's falling like snow from the sky. And the same thing happened in the Marshall Islands. Historians say, quote, "No one knew it was radioactive fallout. The children played in the snow. They ate it." Which brings us to these amazing futuristic children's beaded regalia by Naomi Bebo. These beaded masks are made using an Iraqi gas mask intended for military operations, armor. But even though it's a tool that you may need to survive a toxic environment, it's still aestheticized. It's still beautiful. Bebo offers us another example of what Berlow and Phillips in the textbook call the Indigenous American aesthetic of excess, where the finest Venetian glass beads cover everything, even the soles of the moccasins, even the gas masks, glitter and are beautiful. Always walk in beauty. Also the floral patterns. Those are the ones the nuns, they're similar to the ones that the nuns taught at the mission schools around the Great Lakes. These European floral wallpaper patterns. And this should remind us, again, of how indigenous artists use white settler symbols in a way that it reinforces indigeneity. And another amazing artist who makes futurist indigenous regalia is Virgil Ortiz. Ortiz is best known for his works in ceramics, but he recently started working in fashion and photography. And for the last 2 decades, he's been developing a project called Revolt 1680-2180. It's inspired by the important Pueblo Revolt of 1680, and be sure to look that up if you're not familiar with it. But the artist also says that he's telling a story about resilience. And I'm reminded of another photographer making images of resilience and survivance, Will Wilson. Here are 2 images from his series Autoimmune Response, which is a story that's told in pictures and set in a post-apocalyptic future, not unlike the predicted horrors of a pandemic or climate disaster or nuclear apocalypse. Ooh, question. What's your favorite movie or TV show that uses the nuclear holocaust trope? I like The 100, actually. Notice that as we follow the sight line of the Indigenous man in profile at the top, across the horizon, we encounter fence posts or power lines, and then there's a mushroom cloud, a bomb, or the ghost or memory of a mushroom cloud. It's hard to say. And then right in the middle, it's really faint, but we can see his doppelganger wearing a gas mask. Autoimmune response. The title refers to the body attacking itself. Wilson says, quote, "The series is about this guy who is played by me, who is this post-apocalyptic Navajo man just trying to figure out what happened, why the world is so toxic, so uninhabitable," end quote. Wilson's photography is always in dialogue with Edward Curtis, and he says this is to create a deliberate counter-narrative to Curtis's romantic vision of Native people vanishing or living in an unchanging past. Here we see a Native man of the future, witnessing, responding, organizing, and building. Later in the series, we see a hogan turned into a greenhouse. It's beautiful. And we read about Wilson's work in Jenny Horton's essay, Indigenous Artists Against the Anthropocene, from 2015. And Horton, it's really good. She also brings attention to the work of Anishinaabe Ojibwe artist Bonnie Devine. This is Phenomenology, which she made for an exhibition called Rocks, Stones, and Dust. Devine created an installation consisting of 92 hardwood stakes draped in white muslin, a nice big chunk of gneiss, and a sample of uranium. Say what? Yeah, uranium secured in a can sitting on a glass shelf next to the gneiss, flanked by the stakes. Flanked by the stakes. The 2 seemingly disparate entities, these stories, they meet. Juxtaposing the 2 minerals, Devine may be pointing to that ancient belief that stones are alive, have agency, and that invisible forces are at work within and behind all things. She's definitely pointing out the vulnerability and porosity of our bodies. That uranium sample is in a state of active decay. And as the title, Phenomenology, suggests, the artist may be using the psychological effects of uranium to affect us, the viewer, to physically shift us into an embodied awareness, to help us feel and respect things we can't see with our eyes. She's trying to help us internalize the external. This is the opposite of what we usually consider artists doing. And, her work reaches deep into the psyche because it reaches it not through abstract knowledge and symbolism, but through visceral sensory motor experience. 92 hardwood stakes. 92, the atomic number for uranium. The gneiss is from Serpent River First Nation in Ontario, near the site of an old uranium mine. And the stakes were pulled from another radioactive landscape, and they were used as part of an earlier installation by the artist. And my question is, what do these clothed stakes remind you of? All right. We see Devine bringing the toxic landscape into the gallery. And I want to end today with work by the Death Convention Singers. Here is a ready-made, or an assisted ready-made. It's not a representation, but a presentation of toxic waste. We see a glass bottle full of water taken from the contaminated San Juan and Animas rivers after the Gold King Mine water spill, the wastewater spill, remember, of 2015? That yellow water. It was beautiful, but toxic, you know? Golden, the color of corn pollen, the color of the third world in the Diné creation story. It calls to mind the pictures of Flint residents in 2016 holding bottles of their contaminated water in front of the House Oversight Committee hearing in Washington, D.C. One woman I remember was also holding a clump of her hair, and another was holding a baby bottle full of the lead contaminated water. And they had signs and were shouting, "Would you drink it?" Death Convention Singers. They also bring radioactive substances into the gallery. Those little pieces of wood in the bottom right are radioactive. This is a radical move. You know, what happens to viewers in this space with this kind of artwork? You know, it's something that I've never seen before. People get a taste of what it feels like to live close to radioactive toxic waste. It's sort of like what Chris Burden did, shooting himself in the gallery to give people a taste of gun violence. And this raises awareness to internalize the external. And I want to end today with an artist statement that they put together for one of their multimedia musical performances or ceremonies that we're looking at here. Untitled, a work to internalize the external, to bring into plain view that which remains hidden to all but the outsider and the extraordinary visitor, by simple presentation of physical radioactive isotopes embedded in ancient petrified wood, is both a performance and installation which amplifies and modifies the invisible power of uranium into a visual and audio experience, which seeks to transform and transcend its dangers and ubiquity in Dinéta and the Southwest. Whew, what a sentence. Okay, thank you all so much for deciding to smash those earbuds into your glistening, waxy holes on the side of your head and allow my voice and all these amazing images from Indian country into your magical, magnificent brains. I can't wait to see your images and to speak with you again. And meanwhile, keep waking up, showing up, and growing up. Okay, bye. Bowum boodaloo boo, bowum boodaloo boo, bowum boodaloo.